All right, you guys. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to continue the Zalactic Labs lore, which I began back in the year 2000. And anyway, I just kind of abruptly left Graal 2001 because I didn't understand copyrights and they were stealing stuff. And so finally understand now, like, I still own the copyrights. So I'm just going to continue that lore, and I'm going to continue the lore around this other stuff. I managed to buy the intellectual property rights to Pachuca's levels, and that includes the pantheon of the Graal gods. Apparently, Pachuca created that. And so I still own, that and the story to Destiny and all that stuff. So I'm going to also evolve some of the creatures that I was working on. But I was working on this creature that was called the Lobrum way back in the day. And so what I ended up going ahead and doing was just using like Mid-Journey or whatever to start mocking up different views of this creature, and I wanted to go through a bunch of different concepts, and I picked the one that I thought represented what I was looking for the closest. The Lobrum creature here, this is some AI generated art of it, and this is something that is part of the Graal universe. You can see that it has these big two claws, these big chomping jaws, and these little beady, sneaky eyes, and this helmet with the horns. And the back here is just a tail. So these aren't actually supposed to be legs. It's supposed to just be like this tail, and it pulls itself by its arms. So like it uses its elbows and its claws and comes at you and snips and, eats things. Most likely it probably like digs down into the dirt and then burrows down into the ground and comes back up. So this was another possible version of the Lobrum that AI was working on, which I don't think is very close, but I thought it was, maybe a future version in a game of the creature. But again, I don't like these legs. I don't want it to have legs because it just starts to look like a lobster. So this is more of what I'm looking for. Again, this should not be legs back here on this tail. That should just be a tail. There should not be legs. There's only two arms. The creature only has two arms. I also thought it'd be cool if they could use like their tongue to lick things up. And yeah, so I'm working on the Lobrum a little bit. There's a bunch of creatures from the world back in the day. There's creatures that I never got to reveal because they just stole all my stuff and everybody ripped it apart like vultures and then pretended like nothing else I made was real. And so that was really hurtful. And I'm going to continue working on, this copyright and this content, whether anybody fucking likes it or not. This is, it came from me. Just because you steal it doesn't mean that, like, I'm now going to stay silent forever. I can't live like that anymore. So yeah, I'm working on the Lobrum. This is continued lore. That if you look at the old forums, you could see that people were seeing some of the creatures I was working on. One of the creatures I was working on was called a Fleenie, Flenie. And despite what Ganmon said after I left, Ganmon claimed he created Fleenies. He did not create Fleenies. That's so stupid. I don't know why he claimed he created Fleenies. And Kyle0654 did not create Bommies. He just worked on a morph for them. So, the Bommies, the Lobrums, the Fleenies, these are my creatures. So the other thing I was going to do with the bird was I was going to take that one bird and I was going to evolve it. And I think I want it to be more like a feathered raptor. And so I was working a little bit on that. Let me see if I have something in here to show you. Here. So I had at the top of the mongers, .net message board, you can see that little bird at the top of it. But he had like a beak. And I think I want him to look more like a dinosaur instead. I think that'd be funny. So this was originally featured in the Sky Chapel. And it was known as the Full Heart Bird. And so I wanted to go ahead and give this bird an actual name. And I wanted to call it the Arubis. And so that would be spelled with an I, so it's Arubis, like this. And then we also have Lobrums, we have Bommies, we have Fleenies, and there's other stuff. I'm just not going to go too deep into it just yet. But just starting to break some of this copyright stuff down and turning it into a continued universe. So this is the Full Heart Bird, who I think should be a more like a dinosaur type creature, and he can be semi-aquatic, I guess. I don't mind that. Although I don't know, it might be better if he's not semi-aquatic, just because one of the things that people don't put enough attention to is limitations. Like if your character's too overpowered, it just loses meaning. And so I don't know if this bird being able to, travel the air and the land and the water is really going to add to its, long-term interest in terms of creativity. So maybe I'd get rid of this duck feet and just give him like these big, kind of demonic, dinosaur talons. And he like gnaws on this little bird flute and just plays chaotic newts or chaotic notes from the flute. So flute notes, newts. He plays chaotic flute notes because he doesn't really know how to play the bird flute. And so, when you hear that noise, you know that this creature is near, I guess. But this is going to be part of the world and always has been. So Zalactic Labs was originally what it was just this thing I was throwing together. And I asked Kyle to play a character in Zalactic Labs. Kyle did not create Zalactic Labs. I created Zalactic Labs. So I had a cartoon I called Alactic Farlow. You can see it on my old hard drive on nix.org. And I just, took the G off of galactic because I always loved the word galactic. And I just called it Alactic Farlow. And so I had this old Flash cartoon called Alactic Farlow. And when I needed to just throw up some backstory for Bommies, I ended up just like going through my folder and looking for weird words I've already made up. And I just borrowed Alactic Farlow and I removed Farlow and put a Z in front of it. So that's how I came up with Zalactic Labs. And then I just said, it's a lab and they're investigating Bommies. So it's really kind of a dumb story. I never really liked it very much, honestly, because I don't know. I didn't really like the idea of science being a part of a medieval world, but, it does exist. This is it's a vintage concept. It goes back to the year 2000 when I created it. And so Zalactic Labs is a well-known thing. So I'm going to continue the lore for it. And the way that is going to work is I've decided that what Zalactic Labs actually is Galactic Labs. And it's Z-Galactic Labs. And so what actually the story behind this is back in the day, there's these aliens, right? Let's see, where are those? Remember the aliens from Graal near the brother's house over by the Sky Chapel? So if you take the Sky Chapel and you go to the right on the map, you'll find the brother's house, and then the aliens are like right there. So there's these aliens, and I don't even know who created these, but they were there. There was this whole spaceship in Graal 1.1. And it had been there, and it's so iconic, but nobody ever did anything with it, really. And I always thought that they were so cool and so fun and funny. And so what I wanted to do was pull in some of that lore. And I went through the files recently, and you could see that the aliens were originally called Axe, A-X. They were the Axe aliens. So the race was the Axe race, or species, or whatever you want to call it. So they were called AX alien species. And so what I thought would be interesting is if Zalactic Labs was actually originally spelled like this, and it's an ancient research thing. So when I first released Zalactic Labs on Graal 2001, it was actually a hole in Mount Torah. So you fall into the hole, and there was like this ancient laboratory that was abandoned. You couldn't see it yet because I hadn't had time to build it. But you could walk across this little rope bridge that was over top of the water, and it was just talking about how this is the remains of Zalactic Labs. And so I thought it would be interesting if over time people thought that the G was silent, and so it just got shortened to Zalactic Labs. And what happened was the Z Galactic is actually the last exposition of an alien race. known as Ax. And what that meant was there is no Ax alien race. In truth, just follow along with me. There is no Ax alien race. There is no Zalactic Labs. Just follow along with me. We're continuing the lore here. It's the A through X research facility of an intergalactic species of some sort. We don't know what they are, but this is them. You can see them here. And they just got back from the Y expedition. And so as they landed, on Graal, this was Destination Z from A through Z expeditions. So there was 26 of them. A full alphabet of 26 volumes of intergalactic exploration. And so what happens then is, sorry, I'm trying to get comfortable in here. This is my recording studio. It's freaking uncomfortable in here. So A through X had been completed and volumized. This research was then downloaded and the so-called Ax people were technically a volume of A through X exploration. So they left behind basically a catalog of encyclopedic information. And it was numbered, or lettered, alphabetized as A through X volumes. They were in the process of creating the Y volume. And so it takes them a long time to research and finish each volume. They had just completed the Y exploration and began working on its information. Graal was the Z expedition. The final stop in the mission. And so what you ended up with was, when they left the world, there was left behind, information that had been cataloged on the A through X catalog, and people thought they were the Ax people, but they just don't know what the name of them are. So the aliens are now referred to as Ax. But it's just the A through X catalogs that were being witnessed in the Graal world by the people who had found their databases or their little hideout or their laboratory, whatever you want to call it. And so what ended up happening next was The Y catalog was being heavily processed. Everything the aliens left behind were traces of their analyzation of their, what do you call it, penultimate? No. I think so. Penultimate. Is that the word I'm looking for? Penultimate. The second last, yeah. Their penultimate exploration. So wherever they were before Graal is the Y expedition. So all of that information is being cataloged and traced and left behind in different experiments and stuff on the Graal world. Is literally just all from the Y exploration, which took place immediately before they arrived on Graal. And so we ended up with a society who worships the question and curiosity and wonder. And so that gets translated into different things like the Book of Why, the Book of Questions, or just things that are known with a question mark, or, you know, the people of curiosity, the curious people, the people of wonder. So you end up with all these people who have kind of like worshipped this ancient alien information, and they don't know that it's from aliens. But what is now basically infiltrating the world and becoming the religion of the world is basically people who worship the question, the big question of why, and wondering the meaning of life. And so it hasn't been entirely wrong, but what it was it was just the Y catalog being processed. And the Z exploration was happening throughout Graal. And so the Z exploration, they named it the Z Galactic Lab or exploration. I'm not sure if I want the aliens' home base to be called the Z Galactic Lab or just Z Galactic, and later the word lab is actually, those who have been investigating the ancient Z Galactic thing. And so it becomes more of an archaeological retro reference. So I don't know if the word lab refers to the aliens studies or if I want lab to refer to like archaeological lab. So I haven't really decided that because it's a big decision. But what I'm going to do is, so what happened was the Z Galactic just ended up becoming known as Zalactic over time. And it's lost to time. People don't know that it actually refers to a Z Galactic expedition. Nobody knows this, and they'll never know it, most likely. Maybe the player will find out, like, hints, and the audience can interpret it, but maybe the player never, ever actually knows it. Like, maybe it's never actually known in the world, but you can figure it out as somebody outside of the game, watching your player read certain stuff. But for all intents and purposes, everybody within the world just thinks it's the Zalactic people, or tribe, or whatever it is. This Zalactic ancient civilization. I mean, I honestly think it would probably be more interesting if lab came later and is referring to the archaeological like the I don't even want to call them researchers because that's boring, but like explorers or wanderers and philosophers. So, what ended up happening was the Z Galactic expedition ended up being mistranslated as the Zalactic civilization. And the Book of Why, the Book of Wonder and Questions, becomes like this religious thing, but that was really just remnants of their. So basically, what's happening is in Graal, they're essentially worshiping a separate civilization. So there's a separate civilization that is the Y Galactic, expedition. So the Graal planet was like the final one in the A through Z lineup of where the aliens had to investigate. And so the Y expedition was being researched on Graal while they were collecting information from the Z, the Z location, which is Graal. So they're collecting information from Graal, and that is the Z location. And at the same time, they're processing the Y information from the last expedition, and that's being analyzed. So now you have all of this information that is coming from an alien world, and that's referring to the last place that the aliens had visited, which is the Y Galactic expedition or whatever. And so A through X refers to the encyclopedic catalog of stuff that they've already processed. It's basically 24 different worlds of information that have been, wrapped up in one. And so the people of Graal don't really know what the fuck that is. And they might have pieces of it that were left behind because obviously the aliens are going to take most of it. So maybe what happened was there was like some big cataclysm or something, or fight or war, and the aliens had to abruptly leave. And they had to abort the Z mission. And so the A through X, encyclopedic information has been left behind in different parts. And the world doesn't really know what that is. They think it's part of like the world's history. And it's a lot of it's just like ancient alien worlds and stuff that have nothing to do with Graal. And so they think they're called the Axe people. And so they believe they're the Axe people of the Zalactic ancient civilization. And so this is what the world believes. They believe the Axe people of the Zalactic civilization had access to all of this like high religious spiritual information. And they didn't. It was just like this alien thing who, went through A through X destinations in the galaxies. And then the Y location, which is like becomes the most religious aspect of it. They believe that Y is the religion. And truth is just the Y galactic data that was being processed and handled while they were collecting new data on Graal, which is the Z Galactic location, the final location in their entire mission. And so what we have now, that's where it becomes interesting is, we're now thousands of years into the future or something. And, A through X is historically believed and fully understood, quote unquote, as being a people called Axe. And Zalactic is fully believed and understood, quote unquote, to be an ancient terrestrial civilization of wisdom and knowledge. I would say forbidden knowledge, or otherworldly, forbidden, other, interdimensional, let's say, quote unquote, interdimensional. And so they've just believed this for thousands of years. This is, this perforates and permeates every aspect of of the world of Graal that they know. So there is no such thing as galactic. There is no such thing as axe people. There's aliens. The aliens might have referred to themselves as as the axe people, but that's just because they were operating on a different level of communication. What they were specifically referring to is the A through X crew, space crew, basically the A through X space crew, and they were now investigating the Y expedition, and the Z expedition was where they're collecting data, and so that's what Graal is. So essentially, that is where the direction for Zalactic Labs is going. There's that's going to open up a lot of room to really expand the philosophy of it and the ideas behind it, and not leave it stuck inside of this boring kind of modern, contemporary, scientific laboratory type situation. Instead, I want it to be like this. How like people believe that the ancient Egypt and Stonehenge and stuff was, created by aliens, or they believe that parts of the Bible were written by aliens and stuff, and and that they were worshiping aliens. Like, I like that idea because remember, Graal is from the medieval age, and so there's a lot of lore about how in the medieval times there was like aliens who were actually interconnecting with humanity, and that's what angels were. So we can tie in the Angel Clan and stuff, with the Axe aliens and Zalactic stuff. But I think Zalactic is more something that gets carried into an archaeological type place. Archaeological slash, philosophy. And so they have a laboratory to study the Zalactic civilization. And they literally believe that it is a Zalactic civilization. And maybe there's like a few people who are considered just like outcasts and idiots, and they're being ostracized, and they're being considered like crazy, or just, fringe idiots and eccentric weirdos who might even tell you in the world, and they're just like, hey, there is no Zalactic civilization. It's a Z galactic, I don't even know what you would call it, station and a final destination. Whose explorations were worshipped by a primitive terrestrial, people or location or something. Over time, they embodied it. They embodied and learned from some of their technology and knowledge. So basically, the Zalactic civilization, it was just like this ancient tribe of people who researched some of their stuff, and all this stuff is lost in communication, and etymology gets lost to time. And so you end up with, this tribe or whoever it was, this people who were more, I guess, just like primitive. Maybe they were just like living, by the river and dealing with like these little ancient boats and stuff, just going with, collecting fish and stuff. And then they come across the Z Galactic mission, and they just end up becoming the Zalactic people. And what that is they started taking some of their technology and stuff, and that's where parts of the world started to, parts of civilization started to evolve and take off. So Zalactic just kind of took on power over time, but it was by accident, quote unquote. So anyway, yeah, that's where I'm going so far with this. I'm going to keep working on it. One thing that I have also been doing is I have created a calendar. And so what I have here is I have this calendar here, And there's 1,000 other things. I mean, in order to do this, you have to know a lot about stuff. So I've studied astrology and astronomy for a long, long time. And so I ended up creating, I was the one who created the original time system for Graal back in 2001. I designed it in the year 2000. And so it was the dual star system. I've continued that lore, and I ended up creating an entire calendar now, a Graal calendar. And it has a zodiac, it's got horoscopes, it's got a whole solar system. It explains the dual star system. There's a twist. There's a big twist to it. As so originally they thought that there were two stars, and there's not. There's not two stars, and that's explained fully. And so this calendar explains that. I can talk about it in another video. But there's also an API for this. You can plug into the API. There's months, there's weekdays, and these are, very much named by different like characters and people from Graal lore. And so all of this stuff is very vibrant and rich. And so the zodiac, it has different signs. So there's like the Bami, the Lobrom, the Arubis, which is, that raptor bird from the Sky Chapel. And then there's the dragon, because Graal always had dragons, the knight, the horse, the spider, the axe alien, the angel, and the baddie. So there's a whole zodiac now, and you can actually trace the zodiac. There's a bunch of different planets. There's the central star, and there's different cataclysms that are aligned to actual events that have taken place in history through Graal's history, and they're aligned, to those events. They're aligned to the Graal 2001 lore. And so if you take this calendar, you can basically enter any date on the Gregorian calendar, and you can find what time it is and what the zodiac is for that time in Graal time. And so this is definitely an aspect of evolving, the story and the lore moving forward, evolving the world moving forward. There's a lot of big stuff going on there. So anyway, I'm going to hop off this video, and this is it for now.